Hi, everyone. My name's Melissa Chung-Mowat. I'm the NDP candidate for Winnipeg North. We're here today on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, of which I am a citizen. I'm so honored to be here and to be in the riding that I live in, the riding I work in, and the community that I'm fighting for. It's been a long time since Winnipeg North has had a leader who truly understands our community, who's in it for the right reasons, and who's there to fight for the things we need. I've been hearing on the doorstep for weeks and months now how people are concerned about housing. It's a big issue in our community. People are concerned about finding a safe, affordable home to call their own, an adequate house for themselves. People are worried about their kids being able to access homes. And, you know, we've seen through the pandemic that not having adequate housing has had an incredible impact on our community here in Winnipeg North. This is an issue deeply personal to me. My mom and I struggled for housing for most of my childhood. We didn't have access to stable, secure housing, and it created a lot of hardship for us. It made things hard to find stability. And, you know, when I was 17 years old, we finally found a home that we could put down roots in the community. And I can say for the last 20 years, my mom has been living in that home. And it's been the first time that she's had true stability, true community, true safety in her life. These are the things that we're fighting for in Winnipeg North, and I'm so proud to run alongside Jagmeet Singh and the NDP because the NDP is there for people. We're fighting for the things that we truly need. We're standing up to corporations and the elite to say we need housing, we need this in our community. It is critical. There's no understating the importance of housing for people. When people have access to adequate, affordable, safe housing in their community, they can focus on other things in their lives, other critical needs in their lives. And so I'm honored to stand beside Jagmeet Singh. He's a leader that is different. He truly cares about community. He's here for the people. He understands what struggle looks like and what needs to be done to make sure that we have everything we need so that we can all live in a future where we're thriving together. The NDP has the best platform to address our housing needs here, and I'm so honored to welcome and to be here with Jagmeet Singh, the federal leader of the NDP. Thank you.
I hope you can tell from those words how powerful a candidate Melissa will be for Winnipeg North. The people of Winnipeg North need someone like Melissa who's going to fight for them. I'm so honored to have her on the team. I also want to acknowledge the territories that we're gathered on before I continue. I want to acknowledge that we're on the Treaty 1 territory, the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Oji-Cree, the Dene, the Dakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And as Melissa was stating, this housing is one of the biggest concerns that we hear from people. Across the country, people are worried about finding a place to call home. It is one of the biggest concerns in people's lives, and it is one of the biggest things that people need to be able to start their life. Melissa was pointing that out, that if you don't have a home, everything else in life is so much harder. It's harder to have stability. It's harder to be engaged in the community. Everything else in life is so hard. And for a lot of families, you can't even contemplate growing your family or taking a next step in life unless you have a place to call home. So it's so important. And that's why we are going to fight to make sure people have a place to call home. We've seen over the past 6 years with Justin Trudeau at the helm, what's happened is in 6 years, the average cost of a home in Canada nationally has gone up by $300,000. That is a huge increase, and it's one of the highest increase amongst OECD countries. Housing, buying a home, renting a home has all gone up because Justin Trudeau and the Conservatives before have not made the right investments to tackle this problem. We are going to tackle this problem. We are going to make sure it's a priority. Before I get into some of the solutions that we're going to propose, I want Gabriel and Nicole to share their story. We know that a lot of people are struggling, and I know Gabriel and Nicole's story will sound really familiar to people listening. I want you to know that you're not alone, that there are people that are also struggling like you, and that we have solutions. So before I get into some of those solutions, I want to introduce Gabriel and Nicole to share their story. Gabriel, Nicole?
Thank you. Nicole and myself are both proud Métis. We've been born and raised here in Winnipeg. We had an affordable apartment and we were forced out of it because they were doing renos and increasing the rent. So that forced us to look for housing a little bit sooner, or quite a bit sooner than what are initially planned. And we've been watching the housing market for 3 years now, quite diligently, and everything we see, the prices are going up so much. We both have good jobs. We've gone to school, we've gone to post-secondary education, we've got the work, but we're still struggling to find a place. We just see the prices going way above market value, and then what ends up happening to places we're interested in, we see a bidding war occur. And then it just goes, the prices go up just remarkably, and it's made looking for a house in Winnipeg dreadful, really dreadful. Actually, we're at the point right now where we're thinking of moving out of Winnipeg, our home, the place that we've lived our entire life, and maybe looking to move somewhere else. The selling point of, affordable housing in Winnipeg isn't a reality anymore. And honestly, it breaks my heart to think about having to leave Winnipeg, leave my home.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. I really want to thank Gabriel and Nicole for sharing their story. I think these stories are far too common. What's happening to people that live in a community, have roots in a community, have a job in that community, and can't stay there, not because they want to try a new community out, but because they simply can't afford to stay where they want. They can't stay where they've got family and roots. That is wrong. It shouldn't be that way. We know that people are competing with big money. There's big money in housing. We've heard recent news just a couple months ago of a US firm that boldly declared they're going to purchase $1 billion of Canadian real estate. No one should have to compete. No Canadian should have to compete with these wealthy multinational corporations when trying to buy their first home. So our plan is to put people first, to make sure people like Gabriel and Nicole can find a home that's in their budget. And to do that, we want to focus on first-time home buyers. We want to double the first-time home buyers tax credit and convert it into a rebate. So it's not a tax credit you have to wait till tax time to receive, but it's a rebate that you get right away. So it can help you with the cost of housing. We want to get big money out of housing, particularly when it comes to buying your first home, by putting in an aggressive foreign buyers tax of 20% to discourage big money and make sure it's no longer that people have to compete with big money when buying their first home. We also want to come up with some more creative solutions. When it comes to buying a home, we want to open up the option for friends and family to be able to purchase a home and get CMHC-backed loans that they can purchase their first home. We want to extend the time for a mortgage so that people can find a home that's in their budget and actually be able to afford their mortgage. We are committed to this, and we want to commit to also building 500,000 new homes that are within people's budgets. We can do this. It's a matter of priority. And for the past number of decades, Liberals and Conservatives haven't made it a priority. We will commit to solving this housing crisis, making sure first-time homebuyers get the help they need to buy their first home, to make sure we get big money out of housing, and make sure we invest in building more homes within people's budgets. Donc aujourd'hui, on parle encore de la crise du logement. C'est une crise qui frappe fort. Depuis le temps que Justin Trudeau est devenu Premier ministre, le coût d'une maison a augmenté jusqu'à $300,000 par moyen à travers le pays, dans un chiffre national. C'est un augment qui est un des plus chers à travers le monde, si on fait une comparaison avec les autres pays similaires du Canada. Donc, c'est un bilan horrible de Justin Trudeau. Cette crise était causée par les décisions de Justin Trudeau et des conservateurs en avant qui n'ont pas priorisé l'importance d'avoir un logement. Donc, ce qu'on va faire, on va prioriser cette crise, on va faire face à cette crise, on va s'assurer qu'on fait face aux grandes entreprises qui achètent des maisons, des appartements ici au Canada et qui pensent qu'on peut gagner un grand profit. On veut les décourager avec une taxe contre l'investissement étranger. On veut aussi aider les gens qui veulent acheter leur première maison en doublant le crédit pour la première maison et on le changer dans un rebate au lieu d'un crédit. On veut aussi bâtir 500 000 logements sociaux et abordables pour aider les gens. On peut faire face à cette crise. Justin Trudeau a un bilan horrible et laisser les riches investir de gagner des grands profits. On veut faire face à cette crise et aider les gens de trouver un logement abordable. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm ready to take any questions you might have.
First question, we have David Aiken from Global News.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Our organization today is taking a closer look at climate change, and we're asking all leaders similar questions. And I have a couple for you on this one. We're a couple of months out from the Glasgow summit. What is it about your plan that will get Canada to meet its international obligations, and what is deficient in the plans of the other parties that will make Canada unable to meet its international obligations?
The big difference we've seen from both Conservatives and Liberals is they don't have the courage to take on the biggest polluters. Justin Trudeau put a price on pollution that exempts the biggest polluters. And a lot of people are saying, well, what's the point of that? What's the point of putting a price on pollution if those who are the biggest polluters are exempt? The other thing is we look at this as an opportunity. There is a serious climate crisis. People are worried. We are seeing the impacts of that crisis right now with extreme weather that we've never seen before. Forest fires ravaging our country in extreme circumstances that we've also never seen before. People can't breathe the air. People are seeing flooding, heat waves. And we can tackle this if we make this a priority. And the other thing we want to do is create good jobs that help us fight the climate crisis. We know there's an opportunity here to create thousands and thousands of jobs that help us reduce emissions. That's our approach. Take on the big polluters and create good jobs that reduce our emissions.
That said, there's a lot of New Democrats who work on pipelines. They work building the steel for pipelines. So a couple of pipeline issues. What will you do with TMX? I know you're not a fan of it, so what happens to that asset that the government owns? And are there any conditions which you could see New Democrats supporting a new oil or gas pipeline project? In other words, is there a way to do a pipeline project? So TMX and are pipelines still anywhere possible in Canada?
When we look at this problem, we look at what are our priorities. Our priorities are to fight the climate crisis and to create good jobs for today and tomorrow. And we look at where the global markets are headed. We look at where companies are headed. We've heard from multiple major car manufacturers who've said they're no longer going to produce combustion engine vehicles. We're seeing where the world is headed, and we see the plight of resources and oil sector workers. They're worried. They want to put food on the table. They want a good job. And they're worried because they don't see a future, and they're worried about what that means for their livelihood. It would be irresponsible of government to make investments that aren't long-lasting, that aren't going to create jobs of the future, that aren't going to create jobs that are forward-looking. So our investments will be jobs that make sure people have good jobs, not for just the short term, but for the long term. And those are the type of jobs that will help us reduce our emissions and fight the climate crisis. That's where we want to make our investments, to be responsible and make sure that those workers have a good future. When it comes to the TMX pipe, of course, as you all know, I've opposed the expansion. I think that's the wrong decision. And when it comes to what we do with the asset, we're not in government right now. Once I form government, we'll take a look at what the asset is worth, and we'll understand better what position we're in, and we'll make the best decision for Canadians. But as I've always said, I'm opposed to the expansion, and I think that there's better things that we can do with that money right now to invest in jobs and to help people right now.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Donc, notre priorité, quand on parle de qu'est-ce qu'on doit faire pour investir pour les emplois. Je pense que ça va être irresponsable si un gouvernement ne reconnaît pas c'est où la direction des marchés globaux. C'est clair avec les annonces de grands fabricants des autos qu'ils vont arrêter de produire les autos qui utilisent l'huile. Donc, l'énergie fossile. Donc, ce qu'on doit faire, c'est de s'assurer pour les travailleurs dans ces secteurs qu'on va faire les investissements pour créer des emplois de long terme. Et c'est notre responsabilité de faire ça et c'est exactement ce qu'on va faire. Mais pour la question qui touche la pipeline Trans Mountain, j'ai déjà dit que je suis contre l'expansion. Je pense qu'on peut trouver une meilleure façon d'utiliser ces argents pour créer des emplois pour les travailleurs maintenant. Mais pour ce qu'on va faire avec cet achat du Justin Trudeau, on va l'analyser quand on sera au gouvernement. On va faire une analyse sur c'est exactement quoi notre position pour décider c'est quoi la meilleure approche pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes et notre environnement.
Next question, Annie Bergeron-Oliver from CTV News.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Canada's emergency evacuation efforts in Afghanistan are now done and troops have pulled out. Reports say there are likely thousands of Afghans who helped Canada left behind. Do you believe that Canada's evacuation effort was a failure?
It's with a heavy heart that I say yes, it was a failure. It's coming out more and more with veterans who've said they've raised concerns that the evacuation process should have happened earlier. They made lots of they've raised the concerns and said that this should have started earlier, that there should have been an easier process. Many veterans have raised concerns around the process being too complicated, requiring access to the internet when many people didn't have it, and just not meeting the needs of people in a crisis. And the result is, it's with a heavy heart that we now see thousands of our allies, people that put their lives at risk to support our troops, are now being left behind. And so yes, it's sad to say that Canada has failed, and Justin Trudeau knew about this problem, knew about the concerns, and didn't act in a timely way. And as a result, there's going to be lots of people now that are pretty desperate and not sure what's going to happen to them.
En français, s'il te plaît.
C'est avec une grande tristesse que je dis que oui, c'est clair que l'approche du Canada n'était pas suffisante pour aider nos alliés. Et c'est aussi plus en plus clair que nos anciens combattants ont dit que l'approche du Canada n'était pas suffisante pour répondre aux besoins des gens en Afghanistan. On parle de nos alliés, les gens qui ont mis leur vie en péril pour aider nos forces canadiennes. On nous a dit qu'on va être là pour vous. Mais la réalité, c'est qu'on les laissait à côté. Et c'est tellement dommage, je suis tellement triste en disant ça. Mais c'est clair que l'approche de Justin Trudeau n'était pas suffisante et c'était une faillite. Et maintenant, on a beaucoup de gens qui sont maintenant en péril, en danger. Et ça me rend tellement triste.
As my follow-up, the Conservative leader yesterday said that he's known for quite some time that this was going to happen, that he's received letters from interpreters basically begging for help getting out. When did you realize that this was a problem? And do you believe that you, as a member of parliament and as the leader of the NDP, could have done more to push the government over the last few years or months to help speed up this evacuation?
We learned over the past couple of days of how dire the situation was and how much our veterans were reaching out directly to the Canadian government to say that the response was insufficient. Veterans have made it really clear that the approach that Justin Trudeau had been taking was not good enough. And they had made it clear that it was not going to help people when the pullout was happening. And so it's very clear that Justin Trudeau really dropped the ball on this. It's sad, though, that that's the case. And I want to encourage us to do whatever we can now with our international allies to support any efforts possible to evacuate those allies that support us and their families. I'm just really worried about them now.
But this has been an issue for years that people have seen coming, that veterans have known about. They say they've been writing letters to the government. You were an opposition leader. Do you not believe there's more that the NDP could have done to raise this issue months ago to push the government to start evacuating earlier?
Well, it's clear from what I've read from veterans that they've been reaching out directly to the Canadian government, reaching out directly to the military and advising that this approach was not good enough. And really the responsibility falls on Justin Trudeau as the government, the governing power, to do everything possible to support troops, and they didn't listen to the veterans. And it's sad to say this because we're in a really terrible situation right now.
Next question, Tom Perry, CBC News.
Hi, Mr. Singh. I'm just wondering if you've costed out the changes, the proposals that you're putting out there today, if you've put a price tag on what this is going to cost.
We're going to release more details about our plan, but we want to invest significantly into the housing crisis. We know that this is a problem, and it's really a matter of priorities. We've seen in the past, when something is a priority, we've seen Justin Trudeau act really quickly. When it came to banks and backstopping them in the beginning of this crisis, he was able to find $750 billion to tackle to backstop banks. That's not our priority. Our priority is to make sure we are investing in people. And so this housing crisis is serious, and we are going to do everything we can to tackle it with all the resources necessary.
I'm just wondering how you balance things. If you're taking foreign money out, you're reducing demand for housing. But if you're making it easier for people to buy a home, you're increasing demand for housing. So how do you balance that out? How do you keep the price of housing low?
Well, we don't want a Canadian to have to compete with a multinational corporation that looks at the Canadian housing market as an opportunity to make money. That should not be the way things happen. And we're seeing that. A lot of people are being outbid by corporations that are trying to snatch up property in Canada because they see it as a profit-making scheme. That's wrong. And so we want to discourage that. We want to get big money out of housing. We know that there are a lot of people that want homes and that need homes. And we know that the past number of decades have been where Liberals and Conservatives have not made investments in housing, and part of the reason why we're in this crisis. So we've got to invest significantly and seriously to build more homes that are within people's budgets. We also need to make it more affordable for people to buy their first home. And we are confident if we make this a priority, if we tackle it head on, we can ensure that anyone who needs a home can find one that's in their budget. We can tackle the homelessness crisis. It's really a matter of priorities, and for us, we can do this. We're focused on doing it.
Prochaine question, Jean-Sébastien Cloutier de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, M. Singh. C'est votre troisième annonce depuis le début de la campagne sur le logement. Ce sont des annonces assez coûteuses et vous avez aussi d'autres propositions très coûteuses. Depuis 12 jours, on vous entend dire qu'il faut taxer les plus riches. On a l'impression que l'argent, vous allez aller la chercher seulement en taxant les plus riches. Est-ce que c'est ça ou, parce qu'on ne connaît pas beaucoup votre plan financier pour l'instant, vous allez aller chercher où tout cet argent?
Et c'est une question tellement importante et je veux signaler comment les autres partis, les conservateurs et les libéraux, quand ils font des promesses, ils ont rejeté notre proposition de faire payer le juste part des ultra riches. Donc, si vous entendez une annonce des conservateurs ou libéraux, vous devez aussi écouter qu'ils vont faire deux choses. Soit couper l'aide aux gens ou ils vont mettre la pression sur vos épaules. On est le seul parti qui dit clairement qu'on ne va pas couper l'aide aux gens et on ne va pas mettre la pression sur les épaules des gens. Ce qu'on va faire, c'est plusieurs choses. On va mettre fin aux échappatoires. À ce moment, des grandes entreprises au Canada gagnent des profits au Canada et utilisent les échappatoires dans les autres pays pour cacher leur argent et ils ne payent pas le juste part. On va mettre fin à ça. Ça va augmenter nos revenus des milliards et des milliards. On va aussi s'assurer que les grandes entreprises comme Amazon, qui gagnent des profits records pendant cette pandémie, qui payent virtuellement aucune taxe au Canada, payent le juste part. Une autre façon d'augmenter le revenu. Finalement, on va aussi mettre une taxe sur les fortunes de plus de 10 millions de dollars et c'est une autre façon d'augmenter le revenu. On est le seul parti avec un plan crédible qui ne met pas la pression sur les gens, qui ne coupe pas l'aide aux gens, qui dit clairement qu'on va s'assurer que les ultra-riches payent le juste part.
Par ailleurs, le premier ministre du Québec, François Legault, va y aller de ses demandes au gouvernement fédéral tout à l'heure. Les conservateurs ont rendu public un plan Québec qui a été, somme toute, assez bien reçu. Qu'est-ce que vous proposez aux Québécois cette année, en cette élection? Avez-vous un plan Québec? On ne le connaît pas encore.
Oui, on a commencé avec la livraison de ce plan au Québec. On a dit que ce qu'on a entendu des gens, premièrement, c'est une crise de logement. Donc, notre plan, ça cible la demande des Québécois et Québécoises qui demandent un plan pour faire face à la crise du logement. On a un plan, on a le meilleur plan crédible pour investir dans le logement abordable et sociaux pour faire face à cette crise. Deuxièmement, les gens au Québec s'inquiètent beaucoup de l'environnement. Et on a vu avec les conservateurs et les libéraux qu'ils ne s'occupent pas de l'environnement parce que M. Trudeau a un bilan clair. Il est le seul chef d'un G7, un pays G7, qui a augmenté les émissions, la pollution, depuis le temps qu'il est devenu Premier ministre. Et les conservateurs non plus ont un vrai plan pour faire face à la crise climatique. C'est un enjeu qui touche les Québécois et Québécoises et on a un plan clair pour faire face aux grands pollueurs et pour bâtir, pour créer des bons emplois qui réduisent nos émissions. Et finalement, l'abortabilité dans la vie, on a parlé de s'attaquer aux frais cellulaires et Internet. Et on a un plan pour faire face à ces grandes compagnies de télécommunications quelque chose que les libéraux et les conservateurs n'ont pas le courage de faire. Donc, on a commencé avec notre plan, notre vision au Québec et à travers le pays. C'est si on ose ensemble, on peut bâtir une meilleure société et c'est exactement ce qu'on va faire.
Next question, we have Creason Ejikte from CTV News.
Hey, Mr. Singh.
Hey
Good
there.
morning. Coming to Winnipeg last night and walking around and this morning, you've seen a lot of homelessness, especially among the Indigenous population. And that's not just in Winnipeg, that's just in every urban setting across Canada. So my question to you is, what can the NDP do to help the Indigenous people in Canada with the issue of homelessness, and more importantly, getting a home and with regards to your housing announcement this morning?
I really appreciate the question. We know that with any crisis, it's the most marginalized communities that are feeling that crisis the most. So anytime we talk about solutions to housing, we know it's going to be people that are most marginalized that will get the help. But we know specifically that there has been a lack of attention to the problem of lack of housing for Indigenous communities, and particularly outside of reserves, so in major communities. And so we've been pushing for a urban housing strategy that is for Indigenous people, by Indigenous people. When we've seen plans from Ottawa, they often are an Ottawa knows best approach. When it comes to housing, particularly for Indigenous communities, we need to make sure that Indigenous people are at the table, that the program is made by Indigenous people and for Indigenous people. That's something that I really believe is important, and we're committed to that.
Next question, we have Kelly Malone from the Canadian Press.
Hi. Are you concerned that Elections Canada isn't offering on-campus voting in this election, and how that'll affect your party's winning chances in some ridings? Specifically because only maybe a week ago you had said that it was an important tool for voting.
Yes, I absolutely am concerned about it. I want to make sure voting is as easy as possible and as many people as possible can vote. And on-campus voting has been shown to be an effective tool. People know their campus, students know where to go, and it is a better way to engage more people. So I am concerned about this, and I've been long saying that in the pandemic, this should not have been shut down. We raised these concerns early on when Election Canada was analyzing how they would be conducting a pandemic election, and we said we want on-campus voting. We again encourage the Elections Canada to reconsider that this is another way to encourage voting. We want to have less barriers. We want to make it easier. And we know when it's easier and more accessible, more people vote. For us, democracy is all about participation. And we want to find every way possible to encourage as many people to participate as possible.
And the World Health Organization again this week called for a moratorium on booster shots until more of the world gets their first shots. Would an NDP government commit Canada to not moving on booster shots for at least 2 months like the WHO has requested?
When it comes to our role, the role that we can play on an international level, one of the biggest demands that lower socioeconomic countries or countries with less economic means have been asking is a waiver on patents so that they can produce the necessary vaccines in their own countries. That patent waiver is something that Canada has yet to confirm that they'll do, and it's something that we strongly believe. These pharmaceutical companies, we need to force patent waivers so that countries that have less means are able to produce the vaccines in their own home countries. That's really the most important thing, and I'm committed to that. I want us to do our part to make sure everyone in our country is vaccinated. I want to thank everyone who's gotten vaccinated and encourage anyone else that hasn't yet, please get your vaccine. And I also want to encourage at the federal level us to do our part to support the world. This is a global pandemic. We have a role to play in fighting it globally.
Next question, we have Dylan Robertson from the Winnipeg Free Press.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thanks for taking our questions. The Liberals' plans for infrastructure, reconciliation, and health spending have been met with resistance from premiers, especially in Western Canada. They have final say over a lot of these areas. So are you overpromising, and what will be your approach with these premiers?
This is not an uncommon occurrence. When we first brought in universal health care, something that New Democrats passionately believe in, provinces all didn't agree. But we showed the benefits. When one province signed on, we were able to show the benefit that you get when you have a system that's not based on how much money you have in your pocket or how much money you earn and what your salary is. Similarly, when it comes to things like medication coverage, it shouldn't be that you have to win the lottery of the right job with the right benefit to determine whether or not you get medication coverage. Everyone should have it. We are the only country in the world that has universal health care that doesn't include medication coverage. There's a reason for that, because everyone else figured out it only makes sense that if you get sick and you get prescribed a medication, you should be able to afford it. And it is a massive problem in our country that people can't afford their medication. People get more sick and they end up in the emergency room, which further puts burden on our healthcare system, all of which could be avoided if we made sure that it was included in our healthcare system. Dental care as well. People with dental health issues have direct impacts on their overall health. That's obvious. But people do not have access to dental care. It's one of those, the biggest divides between class, where someone who's got the wealth or has got the right job with the right benefits gets their teeth looked after and other people just simply don't. That's wrong, and we want to fix that.
With respect, the case that you're making is very similar to what Prime Minister Trudeau has said publicly and to the Premier. So I'm wondering if you could explain, how are you going to be different from Trudeau in relation to the Premiers in the prairies?
The way I'll be different from Mr. Trudeau is I'm not going to campaign on pharmacare and then vote against it at the first opportunity in Parliament, which shows he was never committed to in the first place. We put pharmacare forward and said, okay, let's make it happen. You've campaigned on it in the 2019 election. He put it in the throne speech. When we put forward legislation to actually move forward with pharmacare, using his own government commission report's recommendations, he voted against it. I want people to know this. Trudeau campaigned on something that he then voted against at the first opportunity. It shows people he did not mean to get it done. I know it's going to be hard. New Democrats have never been afraid of hard work. We know it's hard to win over premiers. It's hard to win over people. But when it's something that's going to be in the benefit of everyone, when something's going to lift people up, we're never going to stop fighting for it. That's the difference. We're not going to back down. We're not going to give up, because we believe in people and we'll make it happen.
Next question, James Snell from the Winnipeg Sun.
Good morning. Sir, Canada's national debt has skyrocketed in the last 5 or 6 years to over $1 trillion, I believe. What is your strategy or vision to properly manage Canada's finances?
This is a really important question, and for really two major reasons. People have seen this before. When there are financial crises, people have seen the same playbook used by Liberals and Conservatives. They've seen governments either cut the help that people need or put the tax burden back on the very same people that have struggled. We are the only party with a credible plan to increase revenue, to pay for this pandemic and the recovery. We are saying, let us finally make sure billionaires start paying their fair share. And when I mean billionaires, I'm talking about Amazon and companies like Amazon that make record profits in the pandemic, but pay literally no taxes in Canada. We're talking about large, wealthy corporations in Canada that make billions of dollars of profit, that hide that profit in offshore tax havens and don't pay their fair share. We're talking about the extremely wealthy that just because they're billionaires don't pay their fair share. We are going to make sure they start paying their fair share. We are the only party with a credible plan to increase our revenue, to invest in people, that's not going to put the burden on you and your families, and is not going to cut the help that you need.
Yeah, thanks for that. So the thing about very wealthy people is they have the power to leave the country if they want. So do you think that's necessarily a good strategy?
I absolutely think it's a good strategy for a couple of reasons. If a foreign company is making money in Canada, why should they get a free ride? It just doesn't make sense. We need to stop that. A local Canadian company, a Winnipeg company that starts producing a product, that sells that product, will have to pay its fair share. But why would we let Amazon do the same thing, provide a service, but somehow it gets exempt? That is a bad policy if we're allowing foreign companies to get exempt where local companies pay their fair share. I'm not going to let that stand. On top of that, we've looked at the case for a wealth tax, and we are putting in a measure that we've asked economists to look at it, and they said at a 1% rate of fortunes of over $10 million, it would be more costly for the ultra-rich to move their funds rather than just to pay it. So we've looked at that, and we know it can be done, and we're in a different time right now. We've seen billionaires go to space, and people are fed up with the fact that there is these extremely wealthy folks that are not paying their fair share, and it needs to stop. We're going to make sure it stops.
Next question, we have Verinder Rakra from Vision Punjab.
My question is, Trudeau ने इन्नी जल्दी इलेक्शन ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਨਾਉਂਸ ਕੀਤੇ ਨੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਪਊਗਾ ਦੂਸਰੀ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਮੇਰਾ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਸਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਕਾਹਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਦ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਕੋਲ ਸੀਗੇ।
ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ ਸਵਾਲ ਲਈ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਨਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਇੱਕ ਗਲਤ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਮਤਾ ਪਾਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਹਾਊਸ ਆਫ ਕਾਮਨਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੱਥੇ 327 MPs ਨੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਈ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਪੈਂਡੈਮਿਕ 'ਚ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਈ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਤੋੜਤਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਗਲਤ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਅਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਪਰ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਾਲ ਕਰਤਾ ਅਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਲੜ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਲੜ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਮੁੱਖ ਰੱਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਲੜ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਦੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਬਹੁਤ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੋਕ ਹੈਗੇ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਘਰ ਖਰੀਦਣ ਜੋਗੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲ ਹੈ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਕਾਫੀ ਚਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਅਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਪੱਖੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਦੇ ਟਰੈਕ ਰੈਕਡ ਜੇ ਦੇਖੀਏ ਪਿਛਲੇ 6 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਐਵਰੇਜ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਕੀਮਤ 3 ਲੱਖ ਵਧਿਆ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਔਖਾ ਹੈ ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੇਬਰਲ ਅਤੇ ਨਿਕੋਲ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਚੰਗੀ ਨੌਕਰੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਪਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਘਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਖਰੀਦ ਸਕਦੇ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਦਾ ਹੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਅਮੀਰ ਕੰਪਨੀਜ਼ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਨਵੈਸਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਰੋਕਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਮ ਬੰਦਾ ਘਰ ਖਰੀਦ ਸਕੇ ਅਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਖੇਤਰ ਤੋਂ ਪੈਸੇ ਇਨਵੈਸਟ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਘਰ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਜਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਣਗੇ
ਡਿਊਰਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਦੇ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਕੋਲੈਪਸ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੈਨੀਟੋਬਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੜੀਆਂ ਮੰਦਭਾਗੀਆਂ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਆਈਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਨੂੰ ਸਟਰੋਂਗ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕੀ ਕਰੇਗੀ NDP
ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਇੱਥੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪੈਲੇਸਟਰ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਕਟੌਤੀਆਂ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਢਾਂਚੇ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਪਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਹਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਪੈਸੇ ਪਾਈਏ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਲੋੜਾਂ ਪੂਰੀਆਂ ਹੋਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੀ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਖੇਤਰ ਤੋਂ ਹਾਰਪਰ ਨੇ ਕਟੌਤੀਆਂ ਲਏ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਕਟੌਤੀਆਂ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਰੱਖ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਮੇਨਟੇਨ ਕੀਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਗਲਤ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਰ ਪੈਸੇ ਇਨਵੈਸਟ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਧਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦਵਾਈਆਂ ਦਾ ਖਰਚਾ ਵੀ ਇਨਕਲੂਡ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮਦਦ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੋਕ ਦਵਾਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੈਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਖਰੀਦ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਰਕੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਭਲਾ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਅਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪੂਰੀ ਉਮੀਦ ਹੈ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ NDP ਨੂੰ ਵੋਟ ਪਾਓ ਆਪਾਂ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਟੇਕ ਕੇਅਰ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਰਾਖੀ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਰੱਬ ਨਾ ਕਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਦੇ ਲੋੜ ਪਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੋਊਗਾ
Next question, we have Bartley Kivies from CBC Winnipeg.
Mr. Singh, the ceiling for your party in this province has been pretty low, 3-4 seats last few elections. How do you get past that?
We've shown people in this pandemic when times were tough, who is there for you. The Conservatives certainly weren't there for you. In one of the worst crises we faced as a nation, the Conservatives were missing. And when we look at the Liberals, they wanted to do the minimum. We know that people needed help. They wouldn't bring in the CERB. When they did, they wanted it to be $1,000. We forced them to double it to get people the help they needed to put food on the table, to stay in their homes. When it came to the wage subsidy, the Liberals started at 10%. We fought to increase that to 75%. In doing so, we saved millions of jobs for Canadians. We brought in a federal paid sick leave. We brought in help for students who weren't covered by CERB. We have shown the people of Manitoba and Canadians in general that when you vote for New Democrats, you get someone on your side, and people have been demonstrably better off in this pandemic because we were there. And we know in the recovery, people are going to need us as well. And we want to show people we are the only party committed to making sure the super wealthy stop getting a free ride, make them pay their fair share, and invest that back into people.
Let me rephrase that then. Strategically then, you stated what you've shown, but going forward, you got a few more weeks here. How strategically, what will you do in order to increase the number of seats in this province?
Well, we've got to put the choice to Canadians. We want to put the choice to them. They've got a choice in this election. You can vote for Trudeau, who's let the ultra-rich have a free ride, who has already started to cut back on the help that people need, or you can vote for New Democrats, who are going to make sure the ultra-rich pay their fair share and we invest that back into people and make sure we invest that into dealing with the housing crisis that we're talking about today, investing in healthcare, making sure we fight the climate crisis and create good jobs. We can do this, and people have a choice. I'm going to present that choice to them.
Prochaine question, Mina Collin, Radio-Canada, Winnipeg.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Bonjour.
Aux dernières élections, bon, vous avez remporté 3 sièges sur 14. Comment allez-vous faire cette année pour aller convaincre plus de Manitobains spécifiquement pour voter pour vous?
On va faire deux choses. Premièrement, on va montrer dans ces temps difficiles que c'était nous, les néo-démocrates, qui ont livré la marchandise pour aider les gens. Les libéraux ont voulu faire le strict minimum. Ils ont commencé la subvention salariale à 10%. On l'a augmenté jusqu'à 75%. Et en faisant ça, on a sauvé des millions d'emplois. Le gouvernement libéral, Justin Trudeau, n'a pas voulu livrer la PCU. On l'a forcé. Il a voulu commencer à 1 000 $. On l'a doublé jusqu'à 2 000 $. Et en faisant ça, on a aidé des millions de gens, en particulier ici à Manitoba. Avec les deux mesures, on peut montrer comment on a aidé les gens en Manitoba. Mais finalement, on a un choix pour cette élection. Est-ce que vous voulez un Justin Trudeau qui a laissé les ultra-riches d'exploiter le système, ou est-ce que vous voulez voter pour les NPD qui vont s'assurer que les ultra-riches paient le juste part pour investir dans les gens, pour régler la crise du logement, pour investir dans nos soins de santé, pour rendre la vie meilleure?
Et vous allez chercher d'habitude un électorat plus jeune, selon certains politologues. Bon, cette année, à cause de la COVID-19, il n'y aura pas de bureau de vote sur les campus universitaires. Alors, comment ça va affecter les voteurs, les votes pour votre parti?
On a des inquiétudes parce qu'on veut avoir plus de participation et un manque des opportunités de voter sur le campus, c'est un problème. Mais je sais dans mon cœur que les jeunes vont faire une différence historique dans cette élection. On a déjà vu les jeunes qui se militent dans les rues, dans les marches pour le climat, contre le racisme systémique. On a vu des mouvements avec les jeunes qui sont là. Donc, j'ai beaucoup de confiance qu'ils vont participer et ils vont faire une différence historique dans cette élection. Je sais que ça va se passer.
Next question, we have Jeff Keel from CTV Winnipeg.
Oh, hi, Mr. Singh. I just have a question about your announcement today.
Sure.
You want to lower housing prices, but how will you ensure that the equity built in people's homes currently is not negatively impacted?
Well, a couple of things we want to do is we know that there is a pressure on housing that's being created by big money. I keep on citing this, but it was pretty shocking to see just a couple months ago, a U.S. firm boldly declared they were going to snap up $1 billion of real estate in Canada because they see a profit to be made here. I don't want people like Gabriel and Nicole to have to compete with a company that's got deep pockets like that to try to buy their first home. So we're going to discourage that by getting foreign investment out of big money out of our housing market. That's going to help a lot of families. It's going to make it easier for them. We also want to make sure we're building more homes that are within people's budgets. So we're going to invest significantly and massively and seriously in building more homes that people can afford. That means cooperative homes. That means not-for-profit. That means encouraging and incentivizing the building of strictly affordable homes by private developers with GST incentives. We can do this. We know it can be done if we make it a priority, and we are committed to making sure housing is something within the grasp of everyday Canadians so they don't have to worry about leaving, like Nicole and Gabriel mentioned, or just simply never being able to own a home. We want to fix this problem.
Provincially and federally, the NDP have been trying to beat Kevin Lamoureux for a long time. Why is this election going to be any different?
Well, this election really comes down to this choice that Canadians have. We've seen what Justin Trudeau has done over the past 6 years. The housing crisis has gotten worse. The super rich continue to get richer. We are the only party saying, why don't we make them pay their fair share for once so we can invest that back into people and make sure we invest in housing, we invest in our health care. That's a choice that people have, and we are confident we can put that choice to Canadians. And they'll choose Melissa Chung, who will be their representative because New Democrats are there for you and fight for you. They'll choose New Democrats across this country so we can show people there is a better way.
That concludes our press conference. Thank you, merci.
Merci, thank you.